We had two massive stories that broke yesterday. There was the Julian Assange ruling, as well as this one here. The International Criminal Court is seeking warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders. So, this from NPR. The chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court in The Hague said Monday he will seek arrest warrants for top leaders from both Israel and Hamas. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan has asked for warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, as well as the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, and two other senior Hamas officials. Khan has submitted an application with the ICC's panel of judges to issue the warrants. He says Hamas's attacks of last October 7th and the ensuing violence since are the basis for these warrants he's requesting from the court. He said that an initial investigation by his prosecutorial team has indicated that war crimes and crimes against humanity have been committed and continue to be committed by both sides in the Gaza conflict. The charges Netanyahu and Gallant could face for their role in Israel's current Gaza military campaign include the international attacks on a civilian population, murder, persecution, and starvation. Khan said the Israeli state under Netanyahu and its military under Gallant have deprived civilians in Gaza of, quote, all objects indispensable to human survival. Israel is not a party to the international treaty that governs the International Criminal Court, known as the Rome Statute, and from which Khan, as prosecutor, derives his legal power. But the court has previously ruled it maintains legal jurisdiction over the Palestinian territories, including the Gaza Strip, because Palestinian political leaders agreed to grant the court such jurisdiction. That was back in 2015. So here is a tweet from the International Criminal Court, and here is the prosecutor, Khan, giving part of his statement. We're not going to play the full 9.5 minutes, but this is the relevant portion, the most relevant portion, I should say.
I have reasonable grounds to believe, on the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023. The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder, persecution, and allegations of crimes of committing other inhumane acts. It's alleged that these crimes were committed in the context of the ongoing armed conflict and as part of a widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population of Gaza, pursuant to a state policy. Unfortunately, these crimes continue to this day.
Okay, so how do you think the Americans took this news? Well, here's Adam Schiff.
Well, no.
The ICC announcement today is not only misguided and repugnant, it is also a terrible overreach of the body's authority. To make a false equivalence between the actions of a democratically elected government and those of Hamas, a brutal terrorist organization, is absurd. You could tell all the talking points. Yeah, you could tell all the talking points came from the same place here.
Hang on. I'm getting so confused. This is all Netanyahu's fault, and he doesn't represent Israel, but it's a democratic country with an elected government. So Netanyahu does represent Israel then? Which is it, guys? Which is it?
Well, now you add a third complicating factor, which is they're saying this is a ridiculous arrest warrant, right? Because you can't equate Netanyahu with Hamas leaders. This is the bit of narrative spin that they're going to try and pull, which we'll get into in a minute. There is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas, says Dean Phillips, friend of show, whose abhorrent terror attack started this crisis and which continues to hold over 100 hostages, including Americans. A shameful and dangerous step.
I am really sorry we did not have him on and give him more support when we had the chance.
Yeah,
now.
right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Hindsight's 2020, right? A shameful and dangerous step by the ICC prosecutor who's acting beyond the court's legal purview. While deeply disappointed with Netanyahu's leadership and prosecution of the war, sure you are. If you're disappointed with his prosecution of the war, then why do you oppose this arrest warrant? How could you be disappointed with his prosecution of the war and not think he's a war criminal? That's the question I tried to ask him when I was at his event, but he clearly was not going to allow me to ask him that. This abhorrent stunt by the ICC only complicates the achievement of a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and an increase in much-needed humanitarian
Oh
aid.
yeah, it's a stunt.
Yeah.
They just thought it would be fun.
Yeah.
They figured it would boost their Instagram numbers to do this.
Yeah, right. Exactly. They needed some followers, right? This is like the ice bucket challenge, right?
They need to get top influencer dollars.
Exactly. Here's Representative Debbie Wasserman Schmuck, as Russell calls her here. There is no equivalence.
And Adam Schitt.
Oh, I forgot that one too.
Yeah.
I forgot that one. Yes, I did forget that. There is no equivalence. Once again, the word equivalence comes up between Israel and Hamas. Equating a democratic state with a terror group that rapes, murders, delights in acts of genocide, and maximizes civilian deaths demonstrates the ICC's gaping moral failure, moral equivalence. No other nation is held to this standard. Okay, that is so absurd. We will unpack this in a minute. Statement from President Joe Biden on the warrant applications by the International Criminal Court. The ICC prosecutor's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders is outrageous, and let me be clear, whatever this prosecutor might imply, there is no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas. We will always stand with Israel against threats to its security.
Biting tongue for third time in segment.
Yeah. So I aggregated these tweets, and I say a new holiday is born. May 20th shall from now on be recognized as Western Cope Day to commemorate the turning of the rules-based order against the illegitimate empire and her criminal henchmen. Because that's what this is. This is pure cope. Now, on this question of equivalence, if we want to talk about moral equivalence, that's a conversation we really can't have here, as Russell, my very responsible co-host, has said. And so in the interest of not going out of business, we will leave that for another time. But that is not even really relevant to this, because the ICC is not rendering a moral judgment about anything. They are issuing a legal ruling. And so they are not equating Israel and Hamas. What they're saying is there is evidence of war crimes committed on October 7th, which there were war crimes committed on October 7th to the extent that innocent civilians were targeted, because acts of resistance, while legal under international law, also are governed by the same rules of war as any other act of war. So it is a war crime to attack civilians. So there's evidence that that occurred on October 7th, hence the arrest warrant for Hamas leaders. And there is also ample evidence, as we have been highlighting for the last 7 months, so has every other journalist or commentator worth their weight in dog shit, that there has been gross war crimes committed by Netanyahu and by the Israeli state. So what these propagandist liars are trying to do is they are emphasizing an equivalency in their mind between Israel and Hamas, because they want Israel to be weighed against the standard of Hamas, when really Israel is being evaluated against the standard of international law, hence a warrant for the arrest of Netanyahu. The equivalence argument is a diversion. It is to get you to evaluate one state against the other entity, what have you. That is not the question here. That is not the standard here. The standard against which both Hamas and Israel are being evaluated is the standard of international law and the rules of war. Under which standard Israel is fucking guilty. But not only is Israel fucking guilty, Adam Schiff is also guilty. Dean Phillips is also guilty. Sorry, Adam Schiff is also guilty. Dean Phillips, also guilty. Debbie Wasserman Schmuck, guilty. Joe Biden, guilty. They are obscuring the argument because they are all guilty by association. And this could have legal implications too, because earlier this year, Nicaragua sued Germany at the ICJ for enabling genocide. Now, we do not recognize the jurisdiction of this court, which we will get to in the next segment. But the point is, the reason why they have to obfuscate and say that there's an equivalence being made here is because they have no answer to the argument that Israel is clearly and plainly guilty of war crimes, and they are clearly and plainly guilty of aiding and abetting those war crimes.
And you make a good point, because none of them wanted to go on record saying Israel is not guilty of war crimes.
Exactly.
They only wanted to address this red herring
of an equivalence.
Of an equivalence.
Exactly.
They do not want to be on electronic paper saying Israel is not guilty of these crimes, which in and of itself says a lot, because they're all bought and paid for by AIPAC. They're all virulent Zionists, every one whose quotes you featured, which is not unconnected. Certainly in Joe Biden's case, this is Joe, whoever's paying me Biden.
Right.
This is the senator from what was it, MBNA? They used to call him.
Yeah. Whatever the letter thing is.
I mean, I
MBNA,
saw something. I don't know if it's true. I mean, it makes sense because he's the president. I saw something saying he's gotten the most money from AIPAC of any active politician right now.
Also, this point here where you have the Democrats who I featured in this tweet montage here, because Biden said it is an equivalence, and you had Adam Schiff, Debbie Wasserman Schmuck. See, got it right for you, Dean Phillips.
Boom.
Those are who we featured today. We did a story a couple weeks ago. 12 Republican senators raised them and actually threatened the ICC, threatened to ban themselves and their families from ever entering the U.S. And so this was just a decaying empire in total meltdown mode yesterday over a ruling that, according to everyone's eyes and ears, makes absolute perfect sense. Absolute perfect sense. Now, you want to make moral arguments? Again, that's a conversation we can't have this afternoon. But from a legal standpoint, this is totally sound. This is totally sound. And the fact that
they know
you have these politicians not willing to address that, they are instead putting up, as Russ said, this red herring of, well, this is an equivalency. It's not an equivalency. They are not weighed against the standard of each other. They are weighed against the standard of the international law. That's why you have the ICC in the first place.
Yeah. They are starting to realize, just from the fact that I think if this had happened 5 months ago, they would have argued the genocide.
Right.
This tells you people are starting to realize what history is going to see this as, and they don't want to be in the historical record siding with it in that way.
Exactly.
Please clap.